Hey everybody, and welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be looking at Subutai,
Ooh.
a Mongol general who lived in the 1200s.
Okay.
And we're going to be looking at his Wikipedia page and also this really interesting article from a Spanish website.
Huh.
It's called Tiempo.
Interesting.
So get this, Subutai conquered more land than any other military leader in history.
Wow.
That's a pretty bold claim.
That is big, yeah.
So we're going to find out how he did it and why he's considered a military genius.
I love it. I'm ready.
So what's really interesting to me is that he wasn't just like a brute force conqueror.
Yeah.
He was incredibly strategic.
Yeah, he was a master of planning and adapting to different enemies and situations.
Okay, so let's start with the basics.
Okay?
Where did Subutai come from?
Well, so he was born around 1175.
Okay.
And for a long time, historians believed he was from like a really humble family.
Oh, really?
Maybe even reindeer herders.
Oh.
But newer research suggests that his family actually had ties to Genghis Khan's ancestors.
Oh, so not exactly a nobody,
Not quite, no.
but still rose through the ranks incredibly fast.
Absolutely.
Like, how fast are we talking?
Joined the Mongol army at just 14.
14.
Yeah, and became a general in his late 20s,
Wow.
commanding a tumen.
Oh, what?
A tumen, T-U-M-E-N.
Okay.
That's 10,000 soldiers.
Oh, wow.
So in the secret history of the Mongols,
Mhm.
Genghis Khan himself called Subutai one of his dogs of war.
Ooh, that's intense.
It's a pretty intense nickname, yeah.
Yeah.
But it shows just how much Genghis Khan valued Subutai's loyalty and his skills.
So what made him such a brilliant general?
Yeah.
I mean, we think of the Mongols, horseback riding and archery.
Right.
Sounds like there was more to it
There definitely was.
than that.
So Subutai was a master of something called combined arms.
Combined arms, okay.
Yeah, so that means he knew how to use different types of troops,
Okay.
like archers, cavalry, and even siege weapons.
Siege weapons, interesting.
Yeah, all together in a really effective way.
Like a well-coordinated team.
Yeah, think of it like that.
Okay.
Each part plays a specific role to achieve the overall goal.
Cool. Can you give me an example?
Yeah, sure. So let's look at the Battle of the Kalka River in 1223.
Okay.
Subutai was facing a Russian army 3 times the size of his own.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so most commanders would probably panic,
Yeah?
but Subutai, he had a plan.
Okay.
He led the Russians on a 9-day retreat.
What?
Yeah, pretending to be weak and disorganized.
That sounds pretty risky.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, what if they'd caught on?
Well, that's the genius of it.
Okay.
So he knew the Russians were overconfident,
Mm-hmm.
eager to crush him, and he used that to his advantage.
Okay.
The long retreat exhausted the Russian troops and stretched their supply lines thin.
Okay.
So then when they were most vulnerable, Subutai turned around and attacked.
So he tricked them into wearing themselves out.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
And he didn't just rely on brute force either.
Okay.
At the Kalka River, he combined his cavalry charges with carefully positioned archers who rained arrows down on the enemy.
Oh, wow.
The Russians were completely overwhelmed and they suffered a crushing defeat.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Sounds like he was always thinking several steps ahead.
He was a brilliant strategist.
Yeah.
And another thing that made Subutai stand out was his use of siege engines.
Oh, siege engines.
Most people think of the Mongols, horse archers, right?
Right, yeah.
But Subutai wasn't afraid to adapt and incorporate new technologies into his warfare.
What kind of siege engines?
So, for example, at the Battle of Mohi in 1241, he used stone throwers.
Okay.
Imagine like giant catapults hurling huge rocks at the enemy lines.
Oh, wow.
It was like early artillery,
Yeah.
and it completely disrupted the enemy's formations before the main Mongol attack.
I bet that was terrifying.
It would have been pretty scary.
Yeah.
It shows that Subutai was always looking for ways to improve his tactics and stay ahead of his enemies.
So let's talk about one of Subutai's most famous campaigns,
Okay.
the Great Raid.
Ooh, yes.
What can you tell me about that?
Okay, so in 1220, after conquering a huge empire called Khwarezm,
Okay.
Genghis Khan sent Subutai and another general named Jebe
Huh.
on a reconnaissance mission westward.
Okay.
They were supposed to scout out the land, gather intelligence,
Reconnaissance doesn't sound very exciting for Subutai.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this mission turned into an epic journey that circled the entire Caspian Sea.
Wow.
Yeah, they covered over 9,000 kilometers,
That's a lot.
which is like riding from New York to Los Angeles and back.
On horseback?
On horseback, yeah.
That's insane.
It's still the longest cavalry campaign in history.
I can't even imagine riding that far, let alone fighting battles along the way.
I know, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And they weren't just sightseeing.
Okay.
Subutai's forces defeated the Georgian army,
Wow.
crushed a coalition of steppe tribes,
Okay.
and even took on a much larger Russian army at the Battle of the Kalka River, which we talked about earlier.
It sounds like he was racking up victories like it was a video game.
Yeah, pretty much. He was practically unstoppable.
Wow.
And the impact of his victories went far beyond those immediate battles.
Okay.
For example, the Georgian defeat might have actually changed the course of the Crusades.
Hold on. How could a battle in Georgia affect something happening in the Middle East?
So Georgia was planning to send troops to join the Fifth Crusade,
Okay.
but after Subutai defeated them, they were too weak to participate.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing to think about how one battle could have such far-reaching consequences.
Right.
It's like the butterfly effect.
Exactly.
A small change, one place, huge changes somewhere else.
Exactly. And it shows how Subutai's actions were shaping the world, even if people in Europe didn't even know his name at the time.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
incredible. So, okay, after this incredible raid,
Mm-hmm.
Subutai and Jedi, they went back to Mongolia.
They did, yeah.
What did they do next?
Well, I'm sure they got a hero's welcome,
Of course.
but there was no time to rest.
Okay.
The Mongol Empire was still expanding, and Subutai would soon be called upon to play a key role in one of the most challenging campaigns that the Mongols ever faced,
Okay.
the conquest of the Jin dynasty in China.
Oh, wow. Okay, so this wasn't just about facing a new enemy.
Right.
I've heard that the Jin were tough opponents.
Oh, yeah, they
Were
were.
different tactics
Very.
than the Mongols were used to fighting.
So the Jin had fortified cities and used a scorched earth policy.
Okay, what's that?
So that means they burned their own fields,
Nice.
destroyed their own supplies to make it harder for the Mongols to live off the land.
That's a pretty brutal strategy.
It is, yeah.
But I guess it makes sense
It does.
if you're
Right.
trying to stop an invading army.
Right.
So how did Subutai deal with this new challenge?
Well, he knew he couldn't just rely on the usual Mongol tactics of speed and maneuverability.
Right.
He had to be more patient,
Okay.
more strategic, and more adaptable than ever before.
Okay.
And that's exactly what he did.
Okay.
So in 1231, he came up with a plan so audacious, so unexpected, that it caught the Jin completely off guard.
I'm intrigued. What did he do?
He launched a three-pronged attack.
Okay.
One force attacked from the north, the traditional route.
Mhm.
Another tried to cross the Yellow River to attack from the east.
Okay.
But the most surprising move was the third force under Subutai's command.
What did they do?
They invaded the Song Empire to the south.
What?
Now remember, the Song and the Mongols weren't exactly friends at this time,
No.
but Subutai somehow managed to convince the Song to let his army pass through their territory.
That's incredible.
It is.
That must have taken some serious diplomatic skills.
Oh, for sure it does.
Yeah.
It shows how Subutai was more than just a warrior.
Yeah.
He was also a shrewd negotiator,
Okay.
capable of building alliances and exploiting rivalries to achieve his goals.
So what was the point of going through the Song Empire?
After crossing Song territory, Subutai's force swung around and attacked the Jin from the south.
What? Yeah.
It's great.
It was a completely unexpected move. The Jin never saw it coming.
Oh my gosh, he was playing 3D chess with them.
I know, right?
Yeah.
He was thinking on a completely different level.
Yeah.
And this bold maneuver completely changed the course of the war.
Okay.
The Jin, caught between multiple Mongol armies, they were forced to abandon their defensive positions and scramble to protect their capital city.
I bet they were kicking themselves for letting Subutai get away with that.
I'm sure they were.
Yeah.
They definitely underestimated him.
And they would pay the price.
They would. But that's a story for part 2 of our deep dive.
Welcome back. So last time we left off with Subutai,
Yeah.
pulling off this incredible maneuver,
Right.
attacking the Jin dynasty from the south
Uh-huh.
after marching through enemy territory.
Right.
Sounds like he had them on the ropes.
He did.
Yeah.
The Jin were scrambling, trying to defend their capital city, Kaifeng.
Okay, thing.
And this city was huge, with massive walls, a reputation for being almost impossible to conquer.
So what did Subutai do? Did he just charge in with his army and hope for the best? Well, knowing Subutai,
I'm guessing not.
probably not. He was always thinking strategically.
You're right about that.
Yeah.
He was always thinking strategically.
Exactly. Subutai knew he couldn't just storm Kaifeng.
Okay.
He had to plan a long and difficult siege. And this is where we see his logistical brilliance.
Hey, wait.
He built a wall around the entire city,
What?
cutting it off from the outside world.
Wow.
This wall stretched for an unbelievable 87 kilometers.
But 87 kilometers? That's longer than a marathon.
It is, yeah.
How did they even build something like that?
It was a massive undertaking. It would have required thousands of workers, tons of materials, incredible engineering skills.
Wow.
Subutai was basically creating a mini city around Kaifeng to support his siege.
And the people inside Kaifeng weren't just sitting ducks, right?
No, they weren't.
Yeah.
They had their own defenses.
Okay.
Absolutely. The Jin had powerful weapons,
Okay.
including something called thunder crash bombs.
Thunder crash bombs? What are those?
So these weren't bombs as we know them today. Okay.
But they were an early form of gunpowder weapon.
Okay.
And they would have packed quite a punch.
So the Mongols were facing explosive.
They were.
Yeah,
That must have been a challenge.
it was a huge challenge.
Yeah.
And it shows how Subutai was constantly adapting to new threats.
Okay.
He couldn't just rely on traditional siege tactics.
Right.
He had to find a way to deal with these new weapons while minimizing his own casualties.
So how did he do it?
He got creative.
Okay.
He used a combination of old and new tactics.
Okay.
He had his Muslim allies
Okay.
help build giant catapults called trebuchets and mangon,
Wow.
which could hurl huge stones or even fire bombs over long distances.
That's insane.
It is, yeah. But he also knew that simply bombarding the city wouldn't be enough.
Especially with those thunder crash bombs flying around.
Exactly. So Subutai came up with a brilliant strategy.
Okay.
He ordered his troops to alternate periods of intense bombardment with periods of rest.
Wait, so he gave his troops a break in the middle of a siege?
He did. It might sound strange, but it was actually a really clever tactic.
Okay.
By dispersing his troops and giving them some downtime, he kept them fresh, motivated, and most importantly, safe from those thunder crash bombs.
This is probably from getting sick, too.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, sieges were notorious for spreading disease.
Absolutely. It seems like Subutai was thinking about his troops' well-being, not just about winning battles.
It's pretty impressive for a 13th century general.
It is. It's another example of how Subutai was thinking ahead of his time.
Yeah.
His strategy worked. The Mongols were able to avoid the worst of the plague that was ravaging Kaifeng,
Okay.
while the defenders inside the city were trapped facing starvation disease and that relentless bombardment.
That sounds absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
Seems like the Jin were running out of options.
They were. After months of this relentless pressure, the Jin emperor realized the situation was hopeless.
Yeah.
He fled the city, and Kaifeng surrendered to the Mongols.
That must have been a huge victory for Subutai. He had conquered one of the most powerful cities in the world.
Yeah, but the story doesn't end there.
Okay.
According to our sources, Subutai initially wanted to make an example of Kaifeng. He proposed executing the entire population.
Whoa. That's harsh. Even for the Mongols.
Yeah.
Who weren't exactly known for their mercy.
It shows how determined Subutai was to break the spirit of his enemies and secure Mongol control over northern China.
So what happened? Did he follow through with his plan?
Fortunately, no. Genghis Khan, the great Khan of the Mongol Empire, stepped in and overruled him.
Okay, so the Great Khan was a bit more merciful than his top general.
Perhaps Genghis was a fearsome conqueror, but he also understood the importance of building a stable empire. He didn't want to alienate the Chinese population by massacring an entire city.
Right.
He ordered Subutai to treat the people of Kaifeng fairly.
That's a pretty interesting insight into the Mongol Empire. It shows that even a brilliant general like Subutai wasn't all-powerful. He still had to answer to his superiors.
Exactly. And it highlights the different approaches within the Mongol leadership.
Yeah.
Genghis, while ruthless, also had a more pragmatic side.
Okay.
He knew that winning battles was only half the battle.
Right.
He wanted to integrate conquered territories into the empire, not just destroy them.
So after all that, Subutai had finally conquered the Jin dynasty, right? Surely he was ready for a well-deserved break.
You would think so. But remember those Song folks who had reluctantly helped Subutai invade the Jin?
Uh-huh.
Well, they saw the Mongol victory as an opportunity. They decided to try and take back some lost territory for themselves.
What?
They launched a surprise attack and actually managed to seize the cities of Kaifeng and Luoyang.
Wow, talk about bad timing.
Yeah.
They really picked the wrong moment to mess with Subutai.
They did. They underestimated him, thinking they could exploit a moment of weakness. But
Yeah.
Subutai was always alert, always ready for a challenge.
Right.
He immediately turned his attention to the Song, isolated their armies, and defeated them in detail.
He has been furious.
Probably. But he was also a pragmatist. He knew that punishing the Song too harshly would just create more problems in the long run.
Right.
He recaptured the cities, taught them a lesson, and then moved on.
It sounds like he was a master of knowing when to strike hard and when to show restraint.
He was. He understood that true power wasn't just about winning battles, it was about knowing how to secure peace and stability.
Yeah.
And that often required a mix of strength and diplomacy.
Okay, so the Jin were conquered.
Mm.
The Song were put back in their place.
Yeah.
It seems like things were finally settling down for Subutai in the east.
You would think, but just as things were calming down in China, Subutai received orders from Genghis Khan to return west.
What? Why would he be called away at such a crucial moment?
I know, right?
Weren't there still loose ends to tie up in China?
There were, but remember the Cumans, that nomadic group we talked about earlier?
Uh-huh.
They were causing trouble again in the west.
Okay.
And Ugadai had a new target in mind, Europe.
Europe?
Yeah.
Wow. That's a whole new level of ambition.
Yeah, it was. And Ugadai knew there was only one man for the job.
Yeah.
He needed Subutai, his most trusted and experienced general, to lead this new campaign, a campaign that would potentially change the course of history.
I can't wait to hear about this.
Yeah.
This is where things get really epic.
It is a clash of civilizations, a battle between East and West, and it's all going down in part 3 of our deep dive.
Okay, we're back. It sounds like things were about to get really interesting for Subutai.
They were. It was a huge undertaking.
He was being sent west to deal with the Cumans and potentially lead an invasion of Europe.
That's right.
Talk about a career change.
To make things even more complex, Genghis Khan decided to use this campaign as a training ground for the next generation of Mongol leaders. He sent many of his sons and nephews along with Subutai, hoping they would learn from the master.
So Subutai was not only supposed to conquer new territories, but he was also supposed to babysit a bunch of Mongol princes.
Essentially, it could have been a recipe for disaster, with all those ambitious young men vying for power and glory, but Subutai was a master of managing people, not just armies.
Okay.
He knew how to keep those princes in line while also using their skills to achieve his goals.
So where did he start? Who are the first unlucky folks to face Subutai's westward march?
First on the list were the Volga Bulgars.
Okay, the Volga Bulgars.
They had actually defeated a Mongol army a few years earlier.
Oh, so Subutai was probably looking for some payback.
I'm sure he had a few scores to settle.
So how did he approach this?
Well, Subutai, being the brilliant strategist, he decided to use a classic Mongol tactic, the double envelopment.
Double envelopment.
He sent one army to march up the Volga River, drawing the attention of the Bulgars westward. But at the same time, he sent another army hidden from view to cross the Ural Mountains and attack the Bulgars from the east.
Like a giant pincer move.
Exactly. And it worked perfectly. The Bulgars focused on the Mongol army to their west, had no idea they were about to be attacked from behind. It was a complete surprise, and they were crushed.
Wow.
Their territory was absorbed into the Mongol Empire.
Another victory for Subutai. But I have a feeling he wasn't done yet. What happened next?
Next up were the various Russian principalities that had been defeated a few years earlier and forced to pay tribute to the Mongols.
Okay.
Subutai returned with his army, and this time, most of the Russian princes were too scared to fight back.
I guess the Mongols had a pretty effective PR campaign.
They did.
Their reputation as fierce warriors definitely made it easier to conquer new lands.
It did. But there were still some Russian princes who decided to resist.
Okay.
One of them was Grand Duke Yuri of Vladimir.
Okay, Grand Duke Yuri.
He decided to make a stand against the Mongols and gathered a large army to confront them.
So this was a chance for the Russians to push back against the Mongol advance.
It was. But Subutai wasn't going to let that happen. He used his superior mobility and his network of spies to keep tabs on the Russian army.
Oh.
He sent small groups of Mongol warriors to harass Yuri's forces, slowing them down and keeping them off balance.
Classic Subutai.
Right?
Always thinking a few steps ahead.
And while Yuri was busy trying to swat away those pesky Mongol raiders, Subutai's main army was making a beeline for Yuri's capital city, Vladimir.
So he was basically going around the Russian army and attacking their home base.
That's right.
That's bold.
It was, and it worked. Yuri, so focused on finding and defeating the main Mongol army, completely ignored the threat to his own city.
Oh no.
When he finally realized what was happening, it was too late. Vladimir had fallen to the Mongols.
That must have been a crushing blow for Yuri.
It was, and it sealed his fate.
Okay.
The Mongols had deliberately left a gap in their encirclement of Yuri's army, hoping he would try to escape through it.
Another one of those classic Mongol traps.
Exactly. And Yuri, desperate to save what was left of his army, took the bait. He led his forces through the gap, only to find themselves surrounded by Mongols. The result was the Battle of the Sit River in 1238. Another decisive Mongol victory. Yuri was killed, and the remaining Russian resistance in the area crumbled.
It's incredible how Subutai was able to outmaneuver his enemies time and time again. It was like they were playing checkers, and he was playing chess.
That's a great analogy. He was always thinking on a different level. And his victories weren't just about military might.
Okay.
He also understood the importance of psychology.
Okay.
The Mongols cultivated a reputation for being ruthless and unstoppable, which made their enemies more likely to surrender without a fight.
Yeah, why risk your life when you're pretty sure you're going to lose?
Exactly. And this psychological warfare was just as effective as their arrows and swords.
So after subduing the Russian principalities, was it finally time for Subutai to turn his attention toward Western Europe?
You would think so. All of Europe was on edge, knowing that the Mongols were getting closer. But before Subutai could launch his grand invasion of the West, he had one more obstacle to deal with: the Teutonic Knights.
I've heard of them.
Yeah,
Weren't they a powerful group of knights based in the Baltic region?
they were. The Teutonic Knights were a religious military order,
Oh,
known for their discipline and their heavy armor.
okay.
They posed a significant threat to the Mongols' northern flank.
So did Subutai go after them personally?
He didn't lead the battle himself, but he likely provided strategic guidance to one of his generals, a guy named Nevsky.
Okay, Nevsky.
And Nevsky came up with a brilliant plan to lure the Teutonic Knights into a trap.
Okay, I'm listening.
He challenged them to a battle on the frozen surface of Lake Peipus.
Wait, a battle on a frozen lake?
Yeah,
That sounds insane.
it was. But the Mongols were accustomed to fighting in harsh winter conditions. They were much more comfortable on the ice than the heavily armored Teutonic Knights, and they used that to their advantage. They feigned a retreat, drawing the knights onto the ice, and then when the knights were spread out and vulnerable, the Mongols surrounded them and attacked.
That's amazing. They used the frozen lake as a weapon.
Exactly. The Battle of Lake Peipus, also known as the Battle on the Ice, was a decisive Mongol victory. The Teutonic Knights were crushed, and their threat to the Mongol advance was eliminated.
Wow, it seems like nothing can stop Subutai and his armies.
Yeah.
So what happened next? Did he finally invade Western Europe?
He was about to. The stage was set for a showdown between the Mongols and the kingdoms of Western Europe. It would have been one of the most epic clashes in history. But just as Subutai was preparing for this massive campaign, he received news that would change everything.
Oh no, what happened?
Genghis Khan, the great Khan of the Mongol Empire, had died.
Oh no, that's terrible timing. What did this mean for Subutai and his invasion plans?
It meant that everything had to be put on hold.
What?
Mongol law stated that a new great Khan had to be elected, and all the Mongol princes, including Subutai, were required to return to Mongolia for this election.
So the Mongol invasion of Europe was just canceled?
Just like that. It's one of the biggest what-ifs in history. What if Genghis Khan had lived longer? Would Subutai have conquered all of Europe? We'll never know for sure.
It's mind-blowing to think about how one person's death could have changed the course of history so dramatically.
It really is, but even though the invasion was called off, Subutai had already achieved incredible things in Europe.
Yeah.
He had defeated multiple armies, conquered vast territories, and struck fear into the hearts of kings and princes.
So what happened to Subutai after he returned to Mongolia? Did he finally get that well-deserved retirement?
He did not. He was in his late 60s or early 70s by this point,
Wow.
but he was still considered the greatest general in the Mongol Empire.
Okay.
He helped to put down a rebellion, supported the election of a new great Khan, and even led another campaign against the Song dynasty in China.
Wow. He really was a warrior to the very end. It sounds like he wasn't the type to just sit around and relax.
Absolutely not. He was dedicated to serving the Mongol Empire and expanding its power. He died in 1248, but his legacy lived on.
So how should we remember Subutai? What's the most important thing to know about him?
Well, Subutai was one of the greatest military commanders in history. He conquered more territory than any other general. He never lost a major battle, and he was a master of strategy, logistics, and psychological warfare.
Wow.
He was adaptable, innovative, and always a few steps ahead of his enemies.
It sounds like he was a true military genius.
He was. And even though he's not as famous as some other historical figures, his impact on world history is undeniable. He shaped the Mongol Empire and left a legacy that continues to be studied by military leaders and historians to this day.
Well, there you have it. The incredible story of Subutai, the Mongol military genius. We've learned about his incredible victories, his strategic brilliance, and his unwavering dedication to the Mongol Empire.
It's been an amazing journey through history.
It has.
We hope you've enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.